Mike Bradford was the happiest man on this earth. In 10 days, he would marry Angela Wilson, his sweetheart, the love of his life, the woman with whom he would honor his vows and promises until death do them part. Angela's bridesmaids will be her 3 best friends, Betty, Christine, and Dolly. This foursome was always referred to as ABCD, initials. Mike and Angela met during his friend Paul's wedding to Betty. He was the best man and she was one of the bridesmaids. They exchanged phone numbers and soon began dating. A year later, both decided to commit to marriage. Christine had been living with her boyfriend Ron for months and was looking forward to the day Ron would propose to her. Dolly, on the other hand, was changing boyfriends every 6 months. At the moment, she was with Al. Mike's mom, Mary, had never liked Angela. He knew this and thought it would get better with time. He thought it was a kind of jealousy that some mothers felt toward their daughters-in-law, thinking they were taking their sons away from them. And Mike was an only child. His father, Josh, was different. The first day he brought Angela to his parents, Josh told him, "Son, you made a choice. You made a decision. Now you have to take responsibility." Angela's parents, Peter and Julie, blessed their relationship from the beginning. Peter liked Mike from the first time they met. Julie had a bit of custody of her daughter and always looked for the best for her. She asked Mike to buy a house because her daughter couldn't live in a rented one. Mike replied that they would stay in his apartment and buy a house when they could start a family. Like Betty's bachelorette party, Angela's bachelorette party would be attended by only 4 friends. It was to be held a week before the lovers exchanged vows. The location was being kept secret. "Hi, Mike," Betty greeted Mike at the door. "Come on in, Paul's in the bathroom. Have a seat." "I just want to talk to him about a few things." "Don't worry, Mike. Everything's going to be fine. I know how you're feeling these days, but take it easy," Betty encouraged him. "I know, but I don't want any last-minute problems on my wedding day," replied Mike. "We'll be there to solve them if they arise. Don't worry." Betty's cell phone rang. "I have to take this call." She got up and went into the kitchen. "Paul will be out any minute." Mike could still hear the sound of water pouring. Left alone after 5 minutes, Mike made his way to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. He saw Betty on the terrace. She was still talking on the phone with her back to him. He filled the glass and wanted to go outside for some fresh air. As he approached the half-open sliding door, he heard Betty talking, even though she spoke softly, almost in a whisper. No, she was a little annoyed. "Why can't you realize we can't afford 3 guys?" Mike froze and frowned. "Their payment will start when they leave Louisville. Don't forget we'll also need to pay for their transportation to and from Elmer Davis." Mike leaned against the wall, trying not to be seen. "With the cottage rent, booze, and food, we won't be able to spend that much. Don't forget that we're only splitting all expenses between the 3 of us. We can't let Angela contribute a dime. It's her party. 2 guys will be enough. I'll do all the shopping Saturday morning. Cottage, Elmer Davis Lake, Louisville boys." Mike almost fainted. "We'll all ride in my SUV. It's better that way." "All right, I gotta go. Mike is here to meet Paul." Mike immediately put his glass in the sink and hurried into the living room. A few seconds later, Paul came down the stairs. Back at his apartment, Mike thanked himself for managing to keep his cool in front of Betty. He knew she was talking about the bachelorette party. It would be one girl's night out. He wondered who the 2 guys were and what their roles would be. The girls would rent a cottage at Lake Elmer Davis just north of Georgetown, and the 2 guys would come from Louisville. He closed his eyes for 5 minutes, going over everything in his head. When he opened them, he realized what he had to do. He grabbed his laptop, logged in, and started looking for a GPS tracking device. He looked through all the types available and chose the right one with all the features he needed. He bought it from a website with express shipping. Mike's cell phone rang. "Hello," he said, recognizing Angela's number. "Honey." Angela's voice was pleasant. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah, of course. Why do you ask? The way you said hello? I've been a little tense the last few days." "Don't be. Betty called and told me how worried you seemed today." "Yes, Angela, I really am." "You're not planning on running away at the last minute?" Angela joked. "I love you too much to do that." I know you do, honey, and I love you as much as you love me. Angela, we've been exclusive since we started dating, and I'll keep my vows and the promises we make in 10 days. You are and will be my only woman until I die. Darling, of course I expect to be the only woman. We have been exclusive, and I too will honor my vows and promises. I trust you, Angela. Honey, is something wrong? I have a feeling that... It's okay, Mike interrupted her. The thing is, we're taking a huge step in our lives. It's a great decision. Our future depends on it. Building a relationship and having a future together is like building a house. If the foundation isn't solid, it's going to collapse. The foundation here is love, trust, loyalty, communication, truth, caring for each other, and above all, respect. Why are you telling me all this, Mike? Do you have any doubts? You don't trust me? I already told you I trust you. I just wanted you to know what I expect from our relationship as a couple. We're going to be perfect, Mike. We're a couple made in heaven. I have a few things to do, and I'll call you later. Yeah, honey. I love you. Bye. Mike hung up. As soon as Angela hung up, she realized something was wrong with Mike. He didn't answer, I love you too, like he usually did. His voice wasn't the same as usual. The phone rang. It was Betty. Hello, my angel, Betty greeted. Hi, I just got off the phone with Mike and I got the impression something was upsetting him. Oh, don't worry. It's premarital anxiety. It'll be fine once he's between your legs on the honeymoon. I hope you're right. I am right, Betty emphasized. Now let's talk about this Saturday. We're all going in my SUV. Friday night, Mike parked quietly on the street and walked to Paul's house. Betty's SUV was parked in the driveway. He looked around and then slid under the car. The GPS tracker was in a small leather bag that he had attached to the frame of the car with 2 cable ties. He pulled on it to make sure it was well secured. Once satisfied with that, he headed to his car and drove off. Saturday morning, Mike parked 2 blocks from Paul's house. His gaze was fixed on the Android phone. Suddenly, the little dot began to move. He started the car and followed it, keeping a reasonable distance between them. She stopped first at the grocery store, then stopped at the liquor store, then followed Christina and Dolly. When Mike followed Betty to her house, he was pleased with the GPS performance. Once at his apartment, he called Paul to find out when Betty was leaving this afternoon. Why do you ask? Do you want to follow her? Paul laughed into the phone. No, I was thinking of coming over to your place, watching a DVD, having a beer, and ordering Chinese food. I like that idea. Wait, let me check with Betty. After a pause, she'll leave around 4 o'clock. All right. If nothing happens, I'll be at your place around 5. Anytime, bro. At 4, Mike parked in the same spot he'd parked in the morning. 15 minutes later, he started the engine and followed Betty's SUV away. She picked up Christina first, then Dolly, and finally Angela. When she pulled onto Route 227, Mike left a gap of 500 meters between the cars. When Mike saw that the marker wasn't moving, he realized they had reached their destination. He parked on the side of the road and waited. He called Paul, letting him know that something had suddenly happened and he wouldn't be able to come to his place as he had planned. At dusk, he started the car and drove slowly. As he drove past the cottage, he saw Betty's SUV parked in the yard. The cottage was in the middle of a large plot of land on the beach, with trees surrounding it on both sides. He parked the car in the woods 100 meters from the house. He took his bag, which already had everything he needed packed. He walked up to the cottage and hid behind a large tree. From his spot, he could see 4 girlfriends, all in bikinis, having a barbecue on the lake shore. They were drinking wine. He could barely hear them and didn't want to risk getting any closer. After about an hour, it got dark. Mike was tired of standing around looking at the 4 women having fun. Suddenly, he saw Betty grab her cell phone and shout to the others, "They will be here in 15 minutes." They were all very excited. They quickly put out the fire, got all the bottles and food into the house, and pulled all the curtains. Mike realized that he wouldn't be able to see what was going on inside. Just then, he heard the screeching sound of tires. A Honda had just turned into the yard and parked next to an SUV. 2 men with a CD player climbed out of it. Mike frowned when he saw they were wearing long coats. Betty opened the front door, hugged the two guys, ushered them inside, and locked the door. Mike crept quietly to the cottage and went to the window. The curtain was completely pulled back, and he couldn't look inside. He tried looking through the other window, but to no avail. He quietly walked to the back of the lake cottage and tried the sliding door. It opened. They were in a hurry and were so excited they forgot to lock the back door, he thought. The first floor of the cottage consisted of a living room, dining room, and kitchen without any separation. He opened the door a few centimeters and set his camera, connected to a small power bank, on the floor. From where Mike was, he could see what was going on in the living room. He was in the dark, and no one could see him from the living room unless he made a noise. All four women were sitting on the couch next to each other. One of the men turned on a CD player, and immediately music started playing in the cottage. They took off their coats and tossed them aside, moving their bodies to the rhythm of the music. They were wearing only thong panties. The girls nodded excitedly. "Two strippers," Mike muttered angrily. The men began dancing to the music and approached them, swaying their hips back and forth in an erotic rhythm. Betty tried to touch one of the guys, but he promptly dodged her. The women booed the guys. They repeated the same gesture over and over again, preventing the girls from touching themselves, teasing them. The four girlfriends were becoming frantic and very excited. After 30 minutes of dancing, they pulled off their thong panties. The girls' eyes glistened. The strippers started spanking the girls on their buttocks. "Who is the chosen one?" one of the strippers asked. The three friends pointed to Angela. "Would you say hello to my boyfriend?" he asked Angela. "Hi," she giggled. "Won't you give him a kiss since you're his friend?" "Give him a kiss. Kiss. Kiss," Angela's friends chanted. Angela leaned forward and kissed her friend. Mike was filled with anger. He wanted to rush inside and stop this outrage, but he decided to see where his future wife would go with the guys. "I need to say hello to another friend," Betty said, letting go of Angela's head. 10 minutes later, it was Christine and Dolly's turn. Soon, they were all naked. The four girlfriends knelt on the couch and leaned against the back of it. Angela was the first to be fucked. The others took turns. Mike knew he wasn't going to marry this bitch. He left the camera on the floor and quietly made his way to the entrance where the cars were parked. He took a pair of pliers out of his bag and scribbled the word "mood aches" on the trunk of the car. Then he took a screwdriver and slashed the two rear tires. "The thugs won't notice it now, but halfway to Louisville they'll be in for a surprise," Mike thought with a smile. He immediately went back to the back of the cottage. The two men put on their coats and took the money from Betty. After kissing all four women deeply, they left. They got into the car and drove off without noticing the tires. Betty closed the front door and turned to her friends. "We should do this regularly." The other three friends nodded approvingly. "Maybe we should have a girls' night out once a month," Angela suggested. "That's a good idea," answered Christina. Everyone laughed. "We still have a night ahead of us and lots of drinks. Let's have a drink," Betty shouted happily. Mike had had enough. He took the camera and closed the door. He felt beaten. He wanted to cry, and he trusted her. Gaining courage, he made his way in the dark to the SUV and crawled under it. With pliers, he ripped off the cable ties and removed the GPS tracker. He flattened all four tires and walked like a broken man to his car. The next day, Sunday, around noon, Mike arrived at Paul's house. "What's going on? I sensed something wrong from your call." Mike looked worried. "Betty was supposed to be here by 10. She's not answering my call. I'm only getting her voicemail," Paul said. "Have you tried calling the others?" "Let me try Angela." Mike dialed a speed dial number. "Nothing. Try calling Christina and Dolly," Paul said. Mike called both girls, but neither picked up. "Did you send her a message?" "Of course," replied a concerned Paul. "What if something happened to them?" Mike picked up his cell phone and typed a text. "I'm with Paul. He's worried. Betty should be here at 10. Call me." He hit the send button. "Let's wait for Angela to call me." Paul pulled 2 cans of beer out of the refrigerator and handed one to Mike. Half an hour later, Angela still hadn't answered. Mike typed angrily, "If you don't call me now, I'm breaking off the relationship." "Sometimes you have to take the bull by the horns," Mike winked at Paul. Just then his phone rang. "Are you out of your mind?" Angela yelled into the phone. "Paul and I are out of our minds right now. Neither of you picked up the phone. Neither of you answered our messages," Mike yelled back. "Don't! Where are you?" Mike interrupted her. "We got a flat tire. We called roadside assistance and they'll be here soon." "Where are you?" Mike shouted. "Don't worry, it's just a flat tire." "I'm going to ask you one last time. Where are you?" "Please calm down," Paul whispered. "We're at the cottage at Lake Elmer Davis." "Tell Betty to get her cell phone," Paul called her. Paul immediately dialed his wife's number and stepped back a few feet to speak to her. "Now tell me why no one picked up the phone when Paul called." "We didn't want to bother him about the tires. Actually, it was you who bothered us by not picking up the phones. Call the emergency services. They'll come and fix the spare tire. Where exactly are you located?" "Just..." Angela hesitated. "We have 4 flat tires." "What?" Mike was playing nice. "How did that happen?" "We don't know." "Then you better wait for roadside assistance." Mike looked at Paul. "Paul and I are going to Louisville to have some fun." "What? What kind of fun?" Mike hung up without answering Angela. "Call Ron and Al and see if they want to spend the evening with the boys," Mike answered Paul without blinking an eye. That night, the 4 boys went to Louisville and had a lot of fun. They had dinner, went to an adult club and watched naked women pole dancing, and then ended up at a bar. Mike was having a hard time staying calm. One last time before heading out, Mike raised his glass. "Friends, I have a proposition to make." "We're listening," the other 3 said at the same time. "We will not have sex with our other halves until my honeymoon." "But why?" Paul asked. "Just to teach them that we are men, and we're in control." "I agree," Ron seconded. "I second the motion. It's a good idea," muttered a tipsy Al. "If everyone agrees, I won't refuse." Paul smiled. "Let's hope everyone keeps their word," Mike said. "We will," the 3 friends exclaimed at the same time. "And no one must say anything about what we did today," Mike emphasized. The next day, Angela called Mike and asked him where he was and what he was doing with his friends the night before. The only thing she learned from Betty was that Paul had come home late and drunk and had gone to bed in the spare bedroom. The others didn't say anything, or the girls would have known by now, Mike thought. "You see, Angela, I don't know where you all were during the party or what you were doing. Why do you want to know about us?" "I told you we were at the cottage. We drank, ate, danced, and swapped naughty stories. You told me you were at the cottage after the party and after several unanswered phone calls. We also drank, ate, danced, and exchanged salacious stories." "Oh, that's it? What do you think? We went to bed with the whole town?" Mike was aggressive. "I need to calm down," he thought. "No, I didn't mean anything like that. I know you wouldn't do that." "You're right. I would never do that. We have an exclusive relationship, don't we?" "Yeah, yes, of course, yes." Mike noticed the fear in Angela's voice. "But there's one important thing. According to family tradition, we're not supposed to have any contact until we meet in church." "What?" "Yes, Angela, I'd like to honor that. I hope you understand." "Yes, honey, I understand." "Okay, I'll see you at the altar." Angela was still in shock when Mike hung up the phone with a snap. He was cold, no more darling. Sweetheart. Honey, honey, I love you. Maybe it's premarital excitement, Angela said to herself. Mike stood at the altar with the priest standing behind him. Paul, Ron, and Al as groomsmen, and Betty, Christine, and Dolly as bridesmaids stood on either side. The church was full of guests. The wedding march sounded, and Peter led his daughter Angela down the aisle. In her wedding dress, she really did look like an angel. "My dears," the minister began the ceremony, "we are gathered here today." "Excuse me, Father," Mike interrupted him. "Before you begin, I have a few words to say to you. This won't take long." Everyone stared at Mike. "It's not exactly routine, son," the priest said. "But if it won't take you long, go ahead." "Thank you, Father." Mike smiled at the priest and then at Angela. "What are you going to say?" Angela asked Mike in a whisper. "Don't worry. Mike whispered back and turned to the guests. I first met Angela here in this church over a year ago. It was love at first sight for me. When Paul told me she was single and had no boyfriend, my mission was to win her heart. And I succeeded. We dated for a year until I asked her to be my wife. And you all know her answer. Everyone laughed. The priest shook his head with a smile. I love you, Angela whispered. Mike nodded. When we started dating, we made a promise to be exclusive. I've kept my promise. Today our wedding vows will contain these 3 words. I renounce all others. Honey, where are you going with this? Angela was a little concerned. Renouncing all others doesn't mean someone has any intention of cheating after the wedding, Mike shouted. Everyone looked at each other, not realizing what was going on. Angela and her 3 friends stood with a look of fear on their faces. Paul looked at Mike with a frown. I got a call an hour ago, Mike lied. It was a private number and a female voice advised me to watch a video on a website. She gave me a link that I'm going to forward to you. Mike pulled out his cell phone and started sending text messages. I'm going to forward it to you too, Father. Mike turned to the priest. What is he talking about? Betty asked Angela. What video? Dolly asked. I don't know, Angela cried, and those of you who didn't get my message can turn to whoever is watching it, Mike added. The guests broke into small groups. Paul, Ron, and Al kept their eyes on the screen. Betty, Christine, and Dolly huddled around Angela. This is the video from Angela's bachelorette party. Mike turned to the ABCD group. The 4 froze in place. And listen to how they're going to throw a party like this once a month. I knew she was a bitch, Mary shouted. Josh took his wife's hand and shook his head. Suddenly there was a noise. Slut! Paul yelled at Betty. Don't come home tonight. I'll throw all your stuff outside. Take your ass anywhere you want. I'm divorcing you. Betty started to cry. I love you. All of you have had unprotected sex. I don't know what diseases all of you are carrying around right now. Paul exploded back. Children, please calm down. You are in the house of God. Please respect that. The priest tried his best to calm the situation. Julie turned to Mary with a fierce look. My daughter is not a bitch. Then she must be a whore, came a voice from behind her. I'd like to dig into Betty's ass, another voice said. Please, you're in a church, the priest pleaded, overlapping the cacophony in the church. Mike sensed Paul was getting aggressive. He pushed his 3 friends back toward the entrance. This wasn't my idea, Paul. You have to believe me. Betty struggled to explain herself. What? Christina and Dolly pounced on each other. Have you forgotten that you organized your own bachelorette party? Christine snapped. And the next day I had to buy you a Plan B pill, Dolly yelled. Please, Mike, it was a mistake. Don't leave me, please. I love you, Angela pleaded. A mistake that had been planned for days or even weeks, Mike yelled. Don't listen to that bitch, Mike, Mary said. Listen to your mom, son, Josh added. Say something, Peter. Julie got annoyed. What do you want me to say? If I were in Mike's shoes, I'd slap Angela before I left her at the altar, Peter replied, gritting his teeth. Then he stood up and walked over to Mike. I'm sorry, son. I'm really sorry. He then walked out of the church, wiping away his tears. Ron pulled out the ring, showed it to Christine, shook his head, and put it back in his pocket. Christine knelt down and cried. Mike pulled out 2 airplane tickets and held them out to his father. I've changed the names to yours and Mom's. I've already instructed the limo driver. He'll take you both home, get your passports and your suitcase, then he'll take you both to the airport. You're gonna love the Seychelles. But, son, don't. You both really need a vacation. Enjoy it. What are you going to do? Mary asked anxiously. We're going to celebrate our loneliness, Paul intervened. Like teenagers, the 4 men ran outside and rushed to Paul's car. Everyone began to walk out of the church, leaving the 4 friends and Julie behind. I will have to make my report based on the evidence I have, the priest told the women. I sincerely hope to see all of you in confession. He turned and walked away. Come on, dear, come on. Julie took Angela's hand. You're bound to find someone better. He's the best I've ever met, Angela sighed. Can I come over until I get things sorted out? Betty asked Christina and Dolly. No way, not after you tried to set us up. Angela turned to the three women. Do what I did. Get out of this town. It's so humiliating. I can't face the people here. She wiped her eyes and walked her mother to the exit. 3 years later, San Jose, California. In a small church on the outskirts of town, the groom was standing at the altar, waiting for the bride to walk down the aisle. Suddenly, 2 young tattooed men with piercings all over invaded the building and handed out flyers to all the guests. The sudden attack left all the guests bewildered. One of the men ran up to the groom and handed him a flyer. She is a good lover. The man laughed and ran off. The 2 men walked out of the church shouting crazy things about the bride. The groom looked at the pictures on the flyer and read the website address. He looked at the guests. They were all talking on their cell phones. He put his cell phone away. Mike's cell phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Why did you do this to me? Why? Angela was sobbing. Angela, is that you? What's wrong? What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. I really don't know what's going on. Tell me. You ruined my wedding. That's what you did. This is your revenge on me. I'm sorry for what happened to you. I don't even know where you went after you left Georgetown. Who are you talking to, honey? Angela heard a woman's voice in the background. Listen, I just came from my second honeymoon. This time, we were in the Seychelles. Remember the Seychelles? I haven't opened my suitcase yet. Who is this? Angela heard the woman's voice again, but this time annoyed. It's Angela, my ex-girlfriend. Oh, bitch. What does that porn star want? I don't know, she's crying. Something with the wedding, I think, Mike replied to his wife. That's good for her. Honey, would you change the phone number, please? Angela hung up the phone, buried her face in her pillow, and continued to cry. 6 months later, Tacoma, Washington. Now, Mike stopped the rental car in the parking lot of a shopping center across from the church where the wedding ceremony was soon to take place. Sipping his coffee, he watched the entrance to the building. He had been against the idea at first, but it had to give in to Paul's constant entreaties. He kept a close eye on Angela and Betty. He was the one in charge of Angela's wedding. He flew to San Jose and organized everything. He took some pictures from the famous bachelorette party video and printed them out with the website address. Now it was Mike's turn to return the favor. Meanwhile, Paul took his new wife to Las Vegas, the perfect alibi in case there were any questions. Mike kept his eyes on the entrance and suddenly saw the groom pop up outside. With anger, he removed the small bells tied to the trunk of his car. He tore off the "Just Married" sign and threw it aside with fury. At that moment, Betty, in her wedding dress, ran up to him pleadingly. She was crying. The groom pushed her away, got into his car, and drove away. Mike started the engine and drove to the airport.